Hi Math9, here is the tutorial video for the third assignment, or the third series of things we're talking about with Excel spreadsheets, and this one is functions. You'll note that last time we called them formulas, and now formulas are when you put in the math that you want the computer to do, or that you want Excel to do. So I was putting in equals, and then I was saying I want you to do addition, or subtraction, or multiplication. There are math sets that are built into Excel, and we call them function. And they help us do a bit more complicated math without us having to figure out exactly what we have to do with brackets and how do we multiply this and divide something else. There are certain math processes that are very common, and it's been pre-programmed into Excel so that Excel knows how to do it. So they're slightly different than formulas in that instead of you having to figure the math out, the Excel spreadsheet has already figured out how to do it. You just have to say, I want you to use this particular math function. So they're predefined formulas. They return a specific result. And in order for us to understand how they work a little bit more, I need to discuss something called range. So I'm just going to flick back over to our spreadsheet. This is where I left off on the last video. I had some columns in for totals and subtraction and multiplication and division. I didn't tell you how to select a range of cells unless you were to click and drag and just kind of do it this way. So you can select cells in a different manner than this. For instance, up here where I told you you could go to any cell, for instance, let's go to H, what would that be, 5. So if I went to H5, it automatically takes me there, or H10, and hit enter, it automatically takes me there. You can select a series of cells called a range by using a colon. So if I wanted to select the cells from, let's say, H2 to H10, well, I can just click and drag like that, but you could also type it in up here. So if you go H2 and then colon, H10, and hit enter, it'll automatically select those for you. Now, it wasn't a big deal for me to go and click and grab that, but what if I wanted to grab, between the rows, let's say I wanted to grab A12, and I wanted to go all the way down to A500. Well, it's a lot easier for me to go A12 colon A500 and then hit enter than it is for me to click and drag all the way down to 500, which is a long way down there. I'll go back up to the top here. So that's a handy way of selecting ranges, and you can also use ranges when we're going to be putting in functions. I'm going to go back to the notes here. So that's a range. It can be as small as a single cell or as large as an entire workbook. Just make sure you've got a colon in between the starting point and the ending point. And actually, that's one more thing I should note, is I only did it within single rows. You can do it across multiple rows and columns. For instance, let's say I wanted to click on E5 and then select and drag all the way out to K12. Well, I can do that by clicking and dragging, but you can also type that in up here. So I could be starting at E5 and then colon, and then I pick the lower, that's basically the top left part of the box you're going to select, and now you got to pick the bottom right. So let's say I want to pick K15. So I can go E5 and then colon K15, hit enter, and it grabs the data across multiple rows and columns. So that the range range idea is very handy. All right. Now, here's some of the built-in functions that you're going to use quite often. There's an average function. So an average function does exactly that. It finds the average of the values that are in the cell. And all you've got to do is type in equals, then the word average, open a bracket, tell it what range of cells to use, and then close the bracket, and it'll return the average. We know how to compute an average by hand. If I wanted to find the average of, let's say, I'm just going to delete this data for now so we don't get confused. Let's say I wanted to find the average H, so that would be hits, which is this column G. So the average hits for the top 10 players. Okay. Well, I could do that in real life with a calculator pretty quickly. All I need to do is add up all the hits for the top 10 players. I guess that would be down to there. and then divide it by 10, because there's 10 players, and that'll give me the average. But in Excel, I don't have to do that. All I need to do is type in equals average, and it even tries to help you out by showing you all the possibilities down here. I open a bracket, okay, and then you can type in the range, or you can actually go up here and click and drag the range, and it'll put it in there for you. And then you put the closing bracket, hit enter, and then it's going to tell you the average hits for the top 10 players is 156.6. Well, that's way quicker than us having to go to a calculator and do it that way, right? So I could have done that a slightly different way. Instead of clicking and dragging, you can actually just type it all in. So if I wanted to do that manually, I would go equals average, open my bracket, and then I tell it what range. Well, the cell I started at was G2, and then colon, and the cell I'm going to end at, I think, was G11. So G2, and then I type colon, then I type G11, close the bracket, hit enter, I get the exact same answer. Okay? Much, much quicker than doing it by hand or doing it with a calculator. I can easily, if I know there's 3,000 players here, I can easily find out the average of the whole spreadsheet just by changing what's inside the brackets. So let's say I want to find the average for this entire spreadsheet. I can go, I'm going to start at H. Sorry, what was that row number? Ooh. G. So I'm going to start at G2, just like I did before. But instead of only going to G11, I'm going to go to G3000. Okay, so that's the very end of my spreadsheet. I don't have to drag and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. I'm going to start at the beginning, and I'm going to tell it exactly where to stop. And it's going to tell me, if you go all the way down to 3,000, the 3,000th player, and you average everybody in the entire league, the average is only 14.3. Two very different numbers. Well, what if I just average the top 500 players in the league? Now it's up to 21.7. Well, how about the top 100? So that would be going over to 101. Now we're at 54.83. So your numbers are obviously going to change depending on how much data you use. So there's an average. That's one of the very popular functions. There's a sum function, which is basically just addition, right? So if I wanted to add up total hits for all players, I can do equals, and then sum is the function name. Open your bracket. Let's start at E2 again, or sorry, G2. And let's go down to the very end of the list. So that's going to be G3000. All right. So how many total hits for every player in the league? 43,104. Can you imagine how long it would take me to take a calculator and go 175 plus 144 plus 161 all the way down to the very bottom of the list and not make a mistake? There's no way I'd be able to get that number without making a mistake by doing that by hand and calculator. So very, very handy function. What's next on the list here? We've got a count function. This just returns the total number of values in a cell, so it doesn't add what's in the cells, it just counts. So let's just say how many players, and let's do a count. So equal count, open your bracket, and then I'm just going to count. You can count words just like you can count numbers. So if I'm going to count from A2, so that would be this cell right here, colon, all the way down to, let's say, Lucas. Okay, so Lucas is in row 19, so that would be A2 to A19. It's going to tell me, oh, 0. Why did that tell me 0? Well, maybe it only does work with numbers. I thought it worked with letters as well. Let's change this to AB. So what's the category for AB? The column is E. So I'm going to try with E2 to E19 instead. And my count is 18. So instead of adding up the numbers that were in these columns, it just said as long as there's a number in that column, or in that cell rather, I am going to count it. So when I said how many players are there between this cell and this cell, it told me that's actually 18 players. And that makes sense, right? Because we're starting at row 2 and went down to row 19. So that counts it instead of summing it. So those two are different. What's next on our list here? Max and min functions. Very, very handy. Very handy. Okay, so I could go through this list and I could try to find out who is the person that had the most ABs, so at bats, in the entire league? Well, I could go down here and try to keep track with my, with my eyes, or I can do it as simply as equals max, so that's for maximum, open your bracket, and then I want to find out for the at-bats category, so that's going to be row or column E, so I'm going to start at E2, colon, all the way down to E3000, because I think there's 3,000 players here, and it's going to tell me the top number, the top person, has 646. So I don't know exactly where that is, but it's going to be somewhere in this column. Somebody has 646 in here, and that's the most of anybody. So what was that? What did I say? Most AB in league was equals max. Okay. And you can do the whole column, by the way, by just clicking up here and going there. E to E is going to get you the whole column. So that might even be even easier. But say you only wanted to do the first 100. If you wanted to do the most at bats in the first 100, then you would have to do it E2 colon E101, I guess it would be, and it would tell me 609. So whoever's got that 649 number or whatever it was is actually more than 100 rows down in our list. So I'll change this back to 3,000, and there's 646. How about the least at bats in the league? Okay, so let's do. This is going to be 0, by the way, but it's almost the exact same thing, except instead of max, it's min. So equals min, and then I'll do E2 colon E3000 to get down to the very bottom of the sheet, and it's going to say 0. So maybe let's just say least at bats in first 50 players, because that might actually give us a number that isn't 0. So instead of going all the way down to E3000, let's just go down to E52 or E51, and it's going to say, of the first 50 people in this list, okay, the lowest number in this category is 105. So you can get an average for a whole bunch of people, you can get a total for a whole bunch of people, you can get a count of how many people there are, you can get the maximum number in any category, you can get the minimum number in any category. So those are very handy built-in functions. And if you saw the list that popped up when you type equals and then start typing in any letter, and you're just going to see this huge list of potential math functions and formulas. There's A, there's B, there's C, there's all sorts of things you can do. I only picked out 4 or 5 of the ones that I use most often, but there's all sorts of things related to statistics and data manipulation and math that you're going to do at higher levels of high school and maybe beyond high school that you can do in spreadsheets. And it's just going to save you so much time and so much effort. I mean, you're going to do t-distributions and statistics in probably one of your upper level math classes. It's much nicer just to be able to type in your data, hit t-dist, and then put in, whatever data you need to put in and get your result. The data I have right now is actually not going to give me a t-distribution. That was just an example. You could also click the function list up here. So if you're not sure exactly what you're looking for, there's this little FX button up here, insert function, and then it's going to give you like a help list of things that we think that you might need. Right now it's set for most commonly used, and we already talked about sum, average. We talked about count, max, and min. But there's all these other ones that are very common. You can also look in financial, and these are like maybe accounting formulas, or you could look in statistics, and these are all sorts of statistics formulas. So there's thousands of them, literally thousands of them. Chances are if you're doing a lot of math on paper and you find yourself reaching for your calculator a lot because you've got so much data and so many sets of data, you can probably put it into a spreadsheet and find your answers so much quicker if you know how to use functions and formulas. Okay, that should take you through assignment 3.